Congolese have been massacred by white people in the Congo for years and years and years. And if the shoe is now on the other foot, only thing I can say is it's like chickens that always come back home to roost.
Belgium in 1865 at the age of 30. Enormously shrewd, enormously greedy, enormously ambitious, and with an absolutely brilliant sense of public relations. He hired the explorer Henry Morton Stanley, the man who found Livingstone, to go to the Congo and essentially stake out this huge territory for him. Leopold got first the United States and then all the major nations of Western Europe to ratify his seizure of this enormous territory in the center of the continent.
First, Leopold created a smokescreen, claiming that he wished to educate a savage people.
They were all really fooled by Leopold because they took him at his word. They thought he was a man who's going to lose all his money in this crazy philanthropic venture. But they didn't realize what he was really after at all, which was to make himself hugely rich by exploiting brown hands and broad backs who were going to carry the wealth of Africa and load it on ships for his own personal profit.
Extreme violence was employed to impose Leopold's dominion. The right hands of those who failed to meet rubber quotas were severed. Even young children were not spared. In 1896, a German newspaper reported that 1,308 hands had been gathered in one day. Leopold created a 90,000-strong army to enforce his rule. One of his lieutenants wrote, "Only the whip can civilize the black."
They would go into village after village. The army would seize the women of the village and hold them hostage in order to force the men of each village to go into the forest and gather a monthly quota of wild rubber. And they did this for about 20 years. And you can just very easily imagine if you have a village where the women are all being held hostage, the men are all in the forest as forced laborers for several weeks out of each month. There's nobody to plant and harvest food, to go hunting, to go fishing, to do all the normal things through which a community feeds itself. So from all of these causes, starvation, being worked to death, and most of all from the disease that hit this famine.
Did something different. But how many people here have cell phones? If you got your cell phone, raise your cell phone. Get your cell phone. Pull it out. Pull out, raise it. The cell phones that we have, in order for those cell phones to be produced, most of the cell phones that we have, you need a mineral called coltan. A mineral called coltan. Much of this mineral comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Congo is at one of the richest countries on the planet is the Congo. The Belgium and the U.S. government. And they assassinated him. Then a gentleman by the name of Bantou became to power. And the U.S. gave him over $300 million to oppress his own people, to make sure gold and silver and coltan would continue to flow to Europe and the United States and Australia. And then in 1997, when Mobutu died of cancer, there was another person who came to power by the name of Kabila. And Kabila then eventually died, but a civil war ensued. In order to finance the civil war, because cell phones were exploding at that time, they would mine coltan. It seemed like much, but in order to, this cell phone you have, the cell phone I have, it has coltan in it. In order to get that coltan, they would kidnap children to mine the coltan in the Congo. In the last 10 years or so, 5.4 million children have been murdered in the Congo. About a million people. Let me explain it this way. In World War II, 400,000 people died. In the Civil War, 500,000 people. 5.4 million people. Larger than any other conflict, any other war since World War II. More people have died in the Congo than any other conflict in the last 40 years combined. But no one has heard a thing. Because it's happening in Africa, in the Congo, and there's so much money at stake. Coltan. So this is what...
Be a village anywhere in Africa. Locals celebrating with their centuries-old music and dance. But Jambur is 1,000,000 miles from the continent. And these apparent Africans are in fact Indians, whose ancestors have lived here in Gujarat state for up to 1,000 years. Known as Siddhis, this tribe of African descent retains few links with its mysterious past. They know nothing of how or why their forefathers came here. But there is one thing that ties them to their unique heritage.
In our musical performances, we are like one. We all have the same musical style. It's also the same when we dance.
Music and physical features are the few clues that anthropologists have to trace the Siddhis. Some believe their forefathers were labourers from modern-day Kenya and Uganda, who were brought to India on Arab slave ships between the 10th and 14th century.
All the Arab traders or raiders, either way, had to bring lot of these slaves, and at convenient places they were given their freedom when the nearest landmass came.
Anthropologists believe there are up to 15,000 Siddhis living along India's west coast. While they have adopted the local culture, most live in abject poverty, even compared to other Indians. Their reluctance to integrate with mainstream communities means they are often left out of development.
We have a lot to worry about. People in other villages live happy lives, but our people are miserable. So we do worry.
The government has given them special tribal status to guarantee Siddhis access to jobs and education. But life is still hard.
In Chile, very close to Arica. And out of the 18 countries we visited, we've never encountered something like this. This room is a cell where the Spanish held Africans that were forced to procreate, use their children as slaves. The years after 1776, after that, basically the Jesuits were here in this area and they used slaves for labor. But when they left after 1778, the part of the Spanish crown that were in this area used these enslaved Africans for labor, specifically from Congo, Mandinga, Bestoche, Suanese, Guinea, so from many parts, many countries.
Africa, a rich continent with 3,000 ethnic groups and over 1,000 languages. Its history of enslaved people has been taught from the United States perspective. An estimated 650,000 enslaved Africans were brought to what we know as the United States of America. But how many people know about the African diaspora in Latin America? Over 7 million men, women, and children were forcefully brought to Latin America, with 5 million alone to Brazil. Today, there are over 150 million Afro-descendants in Latin America. Who will tell their story doesn't end there. After most of the natives were murdered, the Spaniards needed manpower to build Latin America. Here's where our story begins. Over 15 million enslaved African men and women were brought to what we know as South and Central America and the Caribbean. This documentary rewrites the history taught to us in textbooks and the contributions of African descendants in Spanish-speaking countries. Also included is Brazil and Haiti, two very important nations that are a part of Latin culture. This television program covers themes from the transatlantic slave trade to social issues affecting these communities today. It covers faith, the many religious practices and beliefs of African descendants, and how they are a part of Latino culture now.
The movement of Rastafari, Ban, Yasso,